Welcome to our session on strategies to broaden participation in computer science education. During this presentation, we will discuss strategies for cultivating and fostering inclusive, equitable computer science education in high schools with emphasis placed on their practical implementation, along with the importance of targeted, meaningful communication. We will use examples and lessons learned from individuals and teams who are members of an existing researcher-practitioner partnership, or RPP, specifically the Computer Science Teaching and Learning Collaboratory, CSTLC. If you are interested in learning more about our RPP, please consider watching our other presentation within this 2020 PA CSforAll Summit entitled A Researcher-Practitioner Partnership, the CS Teaching and Learning Collaboratory. While most of us know that there are inequities in access to, engagement with, and retention in high-quality, relevant computer science classes, and that there's an ongoing need for widespread education policy change, we can still take time to think more about what we can do to begin to address them at the district, school, and classroom levels. Research tells us that a majority of parents and educators don't think that a lack of interest or motivation to learn computer science is leading to the underrepresentation in the field. Rather, they believe that it's caused by external factors that can be addressed, such as lack of exposure, lack of opportunity, lack of role models. When we consider different strategies and techniques for broadening participation in CS, we can think about several areas of influence, including institutional practices, community outreach, and instructional practices. Today, we will spend the majority of our time on institutional practices and outreach simply due to our time limit. However, we will first take a few moments to review targeted communication, given its central role in much of our work within institutional practices and most certainly within outreach. Today, when we think about communicating information, we don't simply think about it as moving information from point A to point B, but rather we understand the importance of engagement, which requires an audience-oriented strategy versus an information orientation. The key to much of what we do, including serving a central role in CS student recruitment and retention, is effective stakeholder communication. By community, we mean the entire school community, including parents and families, and also the community within which a school or district is based. We want to think through ways to increase student diversity in terms of gender, race, and ethnicity, and also in terms of encouraging students who might not have otherwise taken computer science to do so. In order to recruit and to impact our community culture, we need to start with our messaging, our communication regarding CS, along with communicating about classes, specific events, clubs, and beyond. An example from a guidance counselor who worked with the NC organization, and specifically Counselors for CS, is as follows. I have partnered with our AP computer science teacher to advertise, market, and inform our community about CS. We're also including information about CS and STEM in general in our career and college readiness curriculum lesson to all students. To begin, we need to identify who our audience is: parents, a specific group of parents, teachers. Then think about what's unique about this group in relation to the topic, and meet the audience where they are in terms of their needs, experiences, goals, and values. We also know that effective communication is one that audiences see as relevant, timely, focuses mainly on the present, comes from a trusted source, and is actionable. Given our goal is often to influence, not simply inform, we need to package messages in a way that is attractive to them. Sometimes we might consider emphasizing certain things that are important to our specific audience. For example, success, ability to go to college, and beyond. Once we have our source and message, we need an appropriate channel, a letter home, But if we need something more interactive, perhaps messaging goes through a PTA. Remember, it's not about comprehension only, it's engagement. Ultimately, we need to develop the skills to advocate for CS using facts, dispelling myths, and sharing the impact on the bottom line when students gain lifelong career skills. Tailoring communication is about making the information relevant, interesting, and actionable. Our audience, parents for example, might have misperceptions about CS, that it's too difficult, that knowing it addresses specific needs but not understanding why it's important overall. They might believe that their children will not get a fair shot. So we need to use this information to get the message right. We should respond to their beliefs, concerns, and misperceptions. The most effective messages tap the values of the audience, things they care about the most. Opportunities in life, mobility, for example, gives a chance to move up. A message has a target audience, a source, channel, and the content of the message itself. What do we know about what a good message is? There is a perception that if we tell a story about someone who's successful, that this can engage. It can, but generally only if the circumstances are similar, if the person can see themselves in that story, versus thinking that this person just got lucky. Therefore, providing factual information can sometimes work better. For example, we used to have X% of students in CS, now we have X plus % of students. It's not about one person, it's about the whole community. We are making progress together. We can discuss what other comparable people are doing, providing a cue that this is happening and that this is a good thing. We can tell people how we're using our resources to do better and how they can help even by simply talking to their children. We can invite them to engage. We're trying to work hard to make progress and would love you to come help us make further progress. Here's a few examples of targeted communication. One is from a letter that would be directed to parents of a child who scored a certain way on a PSAT, and the other is an example of a flyer that one might have and share with their community. Design for information. Really, what do we want people to know? What do we want to say? Design for communication, how we say it, where and when, and focus on today. Design for interaction with our events, opportunities to facilitate dialogue. We could continue our discussion about communication, science, and messaging for quite some time, but what we really wanted to get across here is that communicating about CS is a vital component of broadening participation in CS, and that we can and should be intentional in all of our communications and consider audience, channel, source, and targeting the message. This is key to engaging all stakeholders for equity, sustainability, and quality through student recruitment and community engagement plans. Now we turn our focus to institutional practices that may impact student enrollment and retention in CS. It's important to reiterate here that much of what we will address in today's session is based on what we have learned from teachers, administrators, students, and other educational stakeholders who have shared their insights, successes, challenges, and ideas with us within CSTLC, our RPP. I do wish that this presentation could be different and we could hear from these individuals directly. However, it's me for now, but I do want to give credit for anything you may learn to our dedicated, enthusiastic, informed, and faithful partners. As you can see, institutional practices is a big one when it comes to broadening participation in computer science education. This is why, in part, the participation of administrators, teachers, guidance counselors, and other educators are vital to CSE planning, implementation, and assessment. We can start with what department computer science is housed within in high schools. In some instances, there's a CS department that stands alone, as with other subject areas. In other cases, computer science might be within the math department, science department, or otherwise. In one district we have worked with, it fell within the business program, and the CS classes offered were really more geared to some of the mechanics of CS, using Excel, etc. So one of the important issues to consider in communication and messaging, to refer back a few slides, is to ensure that the community understands what CS truly involves. The department where CS is housed matters for many reasons. Resources of department, if the department values those classes, it can determine who is eligible or considered to teach the classes, and others, including some of the issues we will discuss. It also has potential impact on what students might select to take these classes and can put up a barrier for some. For example, if it is within the math department and let's say a math elective, and a student feels that and perhaps has been told that they are not quote-unquote mathematically oriented, they might not even look at the math electives and would then miss CS. Or they see them but assume that they are too mathematically based for them. As far as classes offered, many high schools who have CS classes tend to offer AP, Computer Science Principles, AP CSP, and sometimes APA. While this is terrific, those classes may not attract all students, especially those who are uncertain about what CS is, why it might be important for them, what opportunities might exist in CS. They also might think twice about taking an AP class in computer science, thinking it might be too difficult for them. It's also possible that a student could take AP Computer Science Principles and at the end of the term not see the relevancy for their future education and or potential career path. Needless to say, some of this has to do with the teacher, the pedagogy, the school culture around CS, but it is important to still think about different classes a high school might offer that could grab the attention of students and be engaging for students who are outside of the norm, let's say, for who we may think would take computer science. Connected to this is what the prerequisites might be for some of the CS classes and their sequencing through high school. For example, if math is not a strong suit and there are math requirements, a student may not consider even trying to take a CS class and or perhaps would not be guided to do so. Additionally, if an intro to CS class is offered every other fall, let's say, then a student might miss out on an opportunity to get introduced to it. Of course, having a CS class count as an elective rather than count toward a requirement towards graduation has an impact on what students may or may not be able to take advantage of. And finally, connected back to all of these is how CS classes are listed in the course catalog and how students can find the information and what the placement of information tells them or not. Ultimately, it's important to make explicit that activities students are doing in class can lead to computing careers. Some specific insight from the field includes the items here. When course registration went online and CS was part of the math department, it was very difficult to find CS within the online catalog, and students didn't enroll. So this teacher and her administrator went ahead and changed formatting and other things, which led to an increase in CS enrollment overall and in terms of underrepresented minority students and young women. Changing the title of a class can be important, make it more appealing. Simply taking out with Python and gaming made it feel more attainable and interesting to young women, for example, and their enrollment in this class increased. Something we have seen across high school is moving toward having no or fewer prerequisites to some CS classes. When doing this, it might be useful to tie it to a change in pedagogy in the classroom to ensure all voices are heard, that it is relevant, and also to ensure scaffolding supports as needed, whether it be in terms of having computer labs open over the weekend, a math help desk, if you will, or otherwise. As you can see, there are other changes that were made that have had an impact on broadening participation in CS in high schools and illustrate that even what we might consider very small or even insignificant changes need to be considered from our audience's, the students' point of view. Continuing from our prior slide, we now turn to the idea that CS education cannot begin in high school if we want to broaden participation and ensure our students have the computational thinking skills and knowledge of computer science that is necessary in today's world, even if they do not pursue CS as a career in some way. Students should be exposed to CS before high school to generate interest in high school courses and beyond. CS integration into existing curriculum in elementary and middle schools is taking place. However, it's vital that we are intentional about this as well as explicit, to be certain to connect the work, the concepts, the skills to computer science for students and with students. We also consider ways that we can infuse computational thinking and CS overall into other subject areas, and want to be certain that there is a progression of concepts, skills, knowledge that builds on each other over the grade levels. For this, we need teacher and administrator buy-in, training, as well as opportunities to share who is teaching what and when, and how new students coming in at different grade levels are caught up, so to speak. We most certainly want to remember 8th graders and middle schoolers in terms of recruiting into and making them aware of CS opportunities in high school, and that you don't have to be on the track or a math genius or computer genius to seek some of these opportunities out. We also want to think about ways to bring CS and computational thinking into other areas of the curriculum. Some great examples here from our partners. When considering CS integration and cross-curricular engagement, it is useful to consider some of the goals of this work, and here are a few. We know there needs to be coordination and alignment in CS and across the board between middle and high school, for example, and we need a process, an institutionalized way of ensuring this can happen. We don't want to leave this to fall on each individual teacher. When we began our computer science RPP, we were joined by school and district teams of teachers and administrators, and after the first year of our work and learning from NCWIT and Counselors for Computing, we better understood the importance of guidance counselors within the area of broadening participation in CS, and realized that they too needed to be a part of our conversation of our district and school teams. Beginning last summer and now ongoing, we have guidance counselors who are learning and sharing with us within our RPP structure. Briefly, the National Center for Women in Information Technology, NCWIT, is a nonprofit community of more than 1,100 universities, companies, and nonprofits working to increase girls' and women's meaningful participation in computing. NCWIT equips change leaders with resources for taking action in recruiting, retaining, and advancing women from K-12 and higher ed through industry and entrepreneurial careers. NCWIT Counselors for Computing provides professional school counselors with information and resources they can use to support all students as they explore computer science education and careers. In addition to processes and procedures in place to ensure communication articulation between grade levels and schools, we also should consider a process for an understanding of the potential need for scaffolded student supports for CS classes to ensure that all students are on equal footing within the class. Along with this, we also take into account the pedagogical approach within the classes, as well as possible spaces for students to go for student-to-student support, to better understand the culture of CS as more open than some might think. This picture represents the cave at Rutgers, which has morphed into a meaningful and important space for CS undergraduate students. We know this is not always possible, but even keeping computer labs open on weekends makes CS more accessible, can help with broadening participation in computing. When we think about additional items within institutional practices, we have some that seem to fall more under a social cultural category. There needs to be an understanding and appreciation for CS within schools, which involves culture change in some cases and a lot of targeted and meaningful communication and opportunities to experience what CS entails. We have spoken about the importance of guidance counselors, can understand the usefulness of incorporating collaborative and relevant pedagogical practices into our CS teaching, relate to the need for student support with regards to CS and beyond. In addition to resources being put into these areas, we need the buy-in of teachers, administrators, the community, and ultimately each school and district can lay out a student CS recruitment plan focusing on bringing students into CS that would not normally end up there. We should remember that two of the most effective ways to recruit are through individual advocacy, meaning individually reaching out to underrepresented students, and through the snowball effect, asking students within CS to encourage their friends to consider it as well. More ideas from the field for broadening participation, communication about CS, and different ways to reach different audiences. An interesting idea, and one that connects to our next area of focus, outreach, and which was brought to us last summer in our CS Summer Institute, is how a teacher focused a computer club on community service and how this increased enrollment and enthusiasm among girls and ultimately increased their subsequent enrollment in CS classes. Now we turn to outreach, which, as you've heard, is intertwined with much of what we've spoken about already. There are many ways to conduct outreach with the ultimate goal of broadening participation in CS and increasing appreciation of the value of CS education overall. There are both external and internal outreach opportunities. For example, internal outreach efforts might include seeking out middle school teachers, students, parents to communicate with, inclusion of CS integration and cross-curricular engagement within middle and elementary school, informing and including guidance counselors in CS planning and discussions, specific targeted outreach to parents of specific underrepresented groups, creating and supporting co-curricular activities, clubs, and summer classes, and/or opportunities to experience CS. Overall, we want to ensure that there are multiple CS learning opportunities that may appeal to different students and that there are different ways that students can access CS, become involved in CS, that there is an awareness of CS learning opportunities, articulation of these opportunities, and supports in place so that interested students can take part in them. There are efforts that seem to cross internal and external outreach, such as school-wide events, fairs, highlighting CS work where community members might be invited and/or representatives from industry, and then external outreach efforts that might involve putting together a community engagement plan and might include seeking out partnerships with institutions of higher ed, industry, or otherwise. These examples are taken from other sources and are items we have talked about for the most part. I would add that if we approach these with broadening participation and computing in mind, there might be specific ways in which we carry out some of these, and these are just some of the things that we spend time on within our RPP. Some of the more practical aspects of doing this work, creating some of the communication around CS and beyond. Additional outreach opportunities where CS might be incorporated in some way, even if not the focus of that outreach opportunity. Many of our partners have incorporated after-school clubs, and several of them have had a terrific experience with Girls Who Code, which is a national organization which provides support to schools to start one of their clubs. We also have partners who have started offering a short summer class, and in fact, we were going to hold one in tandem this summer, but now hope to be able to do so next summer, either in person or virtually. We will be ready then for either. This summer, we had only planned for in person. There are many events that schools can plan for family evenings, family days on Saturdays, and our districts that we've worked with have done some of these and they have been quite successful. We have partners who have held hackathons and some in partnership with each other. They are a great way to encourage community building around CS. Some ideas about how to incorporate CS and computational thinking into some of the other clubs. Needless to say, instructional practices are central to broadening participation in computing. However, we will simply touch on it here, and perhaps we'll have an opportunity at next year's summit to delve into this further. When we think about instructional practices that can be beneficial in engaging students in CS and being inviting to all students, even those that might never have thought of themselves as fitting within CS, we can consider collaborative learning structures and inclusive classroom practices overall, culturally responsive teaching, and paying close attention to the cultural relevance of activities and projects within our classes, project-based learning, and meaningful assessment. As I mentioned before, there is also cross-curricular engagement inside a non-computer science classroom. What is it? What does it look like? How can we leverage it? CSE integration, and all of this is still dependent on having a supportive institutional culture and institutional resources, structures, and processes in place or in development. Although our focus during this session has been on the district, school, and classroom level, and we believe it has been important to focus on specific ideas that are practical and potentially able to be implemented, we did want to very briefly bring the policy level into the picture, as this most certainly drives many initiatives, school practices, funding decisions, and beyond. This session is part of the 2020 Pennsylvania CSforAll Summit, so I believe it's safe to assume that all involved know the influence the CSforAll movement up to this point and certainly moving forward has had. Additionally, there have been and continue to be statewide initiatives and adoption of standards that have and will continue to influence CS in our schools and districts, and ultimately the CS within our classrooms. We will monitor the discussion, but please also feel free to reach out with any questions, ideas, or otherwise. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to be with you again at next year's PA CSforAll Summit.